Hey guys, Still here and welcome to this quick Stormworks tutorial. Let's say you have a whole bunch of batteries and you want to see how much power is in these batteries. Currently I have 16 small ones. I have 8 here and 8 on the second line. I have one medium electric motor and a propeller, and I now want to have this dial read out exactly how much power I have left in that electric motor. The problem is, of course, I can only hook up one of these things through the data-driven input to the dial. So I would only know from this one battery what their charge is, which is not bad, but I much prefer that it adds it up from everything. If you do it like this, you can have a 0 to 1, and since it drains from all batteries evenly, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I mean, this works, but I generally prefer to do this with a microcontroller. And here's how you program one of those. You go over here to the microcontroller editor. Now this gives you a couple of input fields. Don't look at the schematics yet, that'll fill up automatically. Name. This is going to be a battery, let's see, a battery sum of 16 batteries. So I just type X16, but you can type whatever you like here. We're going to make this quite wide and quite long, because it's going to need quite a lot of space. Because that is when we start adding under the logic tab all the different nodes. So each node is going to be one input from the battery. Now you don't have to name all of these things specifically, because if it is just a battery adder or battery sum, then you don't really need to make these things labeled. If you have a massive microcontroller that controls the entire craft, and has more than just the input from a battery, you're probably going to need more. Anyway, I'm going to need 16 of these, and make sure they're all set to number, otherwise it doesn't quite work. This one goes to number, I'm going to need 4 rows of 4. Number. And then make sure you drag all of those things into a specific spot, or the game won't quite know what to do with them. You cannot have overlapping nodes, because the moment that you deploy this microcontroller, the game is going to ask you to connect the specific data points, either being an input or an output, and if you have them all overlapping, then the game doesn't quite know which port you're trying to connect to. Alright, so now we have our 16 entry points for the data from the batteries. Perfect. Now we just need one more. That's going to be the output. It's going to tell me in a percentage how much battery power I still have left. Now this thing is a bit too wide as it currently is, so I can size down the width a little bit. And yes, you can drag this down and make it a little smaller, but just to make it convenient, I'm going to do it like that. Alright, switch to the logic tab. Over here you can see that we have an input and an output, and that's because all of these things are now overlapping. This is an input, but it's not actually an input. This is slightly confusing because the name's not correct. That's this one. It says name is an input, but it's really not. This is the battery percentage output. So that is what it should say in the editor, because now I know what to connect what to. Then we have these 16 data inputs. I'm going to line them all up. And in case you don't have enough room, you can scroll out, or you can zoom in and out by scrolling. And if you want to drag the field along, press your middle mouse button and drag the screen. That way you can drag around in this editor. This one's overlapping slightly. There. Now I have them all lined up. So these are all the entry points. So a battery goes in here and then says, hey, this is how much power I have. Now I want to do something with that data. I want to add it up. For that, you have a couple of different ways. You can go for, oh, that's a subtract. You have the add, adds 2 input values together and outputs the result. This is an opportunity or a possibility that you can use, but you would only need to do it for 2 of them. Because if I do it like this and I try to connect the third, then the second one disappears. So sure, this works, but it's not great. Ideally, you could use a function. And the functions, again, come in different sizes. You have function that only uses one input, that is x. You can go for 3. You can go for 8. You can go for Boolean functions and Boolean functions with more inputs. But these are on-off inputs, and I need data inputs. So I'm going to go with 2 of these very large things, which have x, y, z, w, a, b, c, and d. So that gives me 8 inputs. I'm going to set down 2, 1 here. I'm holding shift, clicking once, releasing shift, clicking twice. Just space these out more or less. The spacing is not too important, but it's more so that you have an idea what goes where. All right, connect 8 of the batteries to one of these adders. One of these function blocks. That's 1. Connecting the rest. And the last one. There. Now, what I have done is actually not much, because at the moment it goes to this function block, but the function block doesn't do anything. We need to tell the function block what it should be doing with all this stuff. So this should be x plus y plus z plus w plus a plus b plus c plus d. All of that. You can copy this, and you can go to the other one, and you can paste it. So now what it returns is probably a value of 8 if all the batteries are charged, which is interesting, but it's not quite what I want, because I want it as a percentage. So what I'm going to do is make these things in brackets, and then say, okay, do all that, and then divide it by 8. This way it returns an output of 1 if it's full and 0 if it's empty. And the same thing goes here, so I just paste it over that one. Now we get 2 of these. Now I can use a standard function block, which only has 2 inputs, or 3 in this case, so an x, y, and a z. You connect these 2 together. One goes to x and one goes to y. Again, I'm going to go for x plus y. That's what I want to do first, so add up these things. Then divide it by 2. Because I now have a potential of 2. So this thing is going to output 1. This thing is going to output 1. And then 1 and 1 makes 2. So divide it by 2. And then do that by 100. So that's 100%. Connect this one up to the battery percentage output. And then save it. Make sure you save it as a microcontroller name that is suitable for your creation. So in my case, I'm going to go for battery X16. Save, and then you can close the editor. Back. Now it doesn't actually place it down yet, you still have to do that manually. So we're going to find in the component inventory the battery, and I'm going to look for battery X16. There it is, battery sum X16. As you can see, it's pretty large, but it is still easier than putting down all sorts of separate function blocks, because you can do that if you want to. You can use the function blocks, but they're only with 3 inputs. They don't have the large ones, the X, Y, Z, W, A, B, C, and D that we just used in the microcontroller. Next up, hooking everything up. All of the first ones, and again, it doesn't matter which order you do these in, just make sure they are all hooked up. You might have noticed how the one that went to this dial is now going to 2 separate displays. That doesn't matter because we're going to replace this display anyway, that dial over there. All right, the third layer. And then the fourth layer. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we have the output, battery percentage output, and that is what I want on this dial. That does require a bit of a change on the dial, because it's going to output a value which is between 0 and 100. And currently my dial is not quite capable of doing that. It's going to go to 1. So change your max value here from 1 to 100. Now I can spawn it in and test if it works. We have full battery power, 100%. If I start speeding up, you can see that the batteries are all going to be decharging. It doesn't quite give you an indicator on the battery itself, unfortunately, but this is a way that you can add all your batteries together and see how much power they have left. Of course, I can speed this thing all the way up, but I think that the prop is running about as fast as it can possibly go on this medium motor. So this is how you do it. And you can make these microcontrollers as big or as small as you need them. You can go for a design that is wider if you so need it. So you can reorganize some of these slots. And if your craft maybe doesn't have as much room, then you can go and make it a little bit less wide. Again, it doesn't really matter, just so long as all these nodes have their own little spot on the grid square, and that should do it for you. If you have any questions about the way that you add these functions up, then by all means, post me below in the comments, and I'll try to help you along. If you have a request for a specific tutorial in Stormworks, something that's not quite clear, or something you want to figure out, let me know down below in the comments, because I'm here to help you guys. Just submit a request for a tutorial, or say, hey, can you do a quick video on this, and I would be happy to. Hope you enjoyed it, hope it was useful, hope it answered a question that you were struggling with, and good luck building whatever it is that you're building in Stormworks.